very good evening to everybody here. Uh, this is, as Ruchika pointed out, this is the last panel discussion, and it will be followed by a fireside chat with another regulator. But that comes after maybe quarter past 7. Till that time, what we'll do is we will discuss, as she said, defense and private sector collaboration and coordination, and the participants from the is Mr. Rajendra Singh Bhatia, who is the president and chairman of the Kalyani Group Defense. Then we have Admiral R. Harikumar, who till last year was the chief of the naval staff. And then, of course, we have Dr. Sameer V. Kamath, who heads a very important organization in the government of India, DRDO, Defense Research and Development Organization. And the subject, as I said, is defense and private sector collaboration and coordination. And the context is that the private sector's role in defense is very small right now. It's rising. So let me be a little provocative here and suggest that whether this defense and private sector, is it only about collaboration and coordination, or is it also about collision? You know, these days you talk about, 3 C's. So I'm just saying that is it only about collaboration and coordination, or is there something more which is collision? Is the defense in the private sector, the defense establishment as such, is in the same room or not, on the same page or not? But the fact of the matter is, the government's policy is very clear that it wants the private sector to increase its share in total, in the defense industry from 21%. Its exports need to grow up from the private sector by almost 35% in the next 5 years. So all those targets have been set. So what I will do is this, that since we have such a stellar panel, I would not stand in between and first ask, starting from Dr. Kamath, to give us his perspective on defense and private sector collaboration and coordination, and is there any collision in the making or in the offing or what, and after which I will ask Admiral Harikumar to expand on that same subject, first 10 minutes, and then Mr. Bhatia, and then we will go into a quick round of questions among ourselves, and I'm sure time will permit to, if there are any questions from the floor, we will take them. So, Dr. Kamath, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. I think private sector participation, not only in defense production, but also in defense R&D, is going to be absolutely essential if we have to become fully Atmanirbhar and we have to become a technology leader, which are the goals which our Honorable Prime Minister has set for us. The other goal we have is to increase the share of exports in our defense production. As you are aware, last year we exported about 21,000 crores worth of defense systems. And our target is to reach 50,000 crores by 2028-29 and 1 lakh crore by 2034-2035. So if we have to meet these targets, the participation of private sector is absolutely essential. I don't think we have a choice. Private sector is definitely, I would say, more dynamic than the government organizations. They have more flexibility in terms of how they can hire the latest talent or the best talent. Private sector, especially the startups and MSMEs, are also very flexible organizations. And with disruptive technologies coming in, we need definitely these startups and MSMEs to contribute in the innovations that are happening rapidly. which the government organizations or PSUs are not that capable of, changing their work or nature of work at a short notice. So I would say that the participation of private sector has started increasing, and I'm sure in the next few years we will have an equal role of private sector as public sector and government organizations, not only in defense production but also in defense R&D. So with this, I will hand it over to
Admiral Nair.
Thank you. There is no doubt that, if we need to achieve Atmanirbharta in defense, we need to harness all the capability and capacity that is available in the country. And private sector is obviously has to be harnessed. As far as the Navy is concerned, we had given a commitment that by 2047 we'll be a fully Atmanirbhar force. And to work towards that, we have seen that the collaboration with the private sector has been a real force multiplier in many ways. If you look at the case of, say, Vikrant, made by Cochin Shipyard, but it had employed almost 500 MSMEs, for making various components and, supporting the building of the shipbuilding itself. And that had its own multiplier effect on jobs, on the economy, and so on. The question of whether it is likely to lead to collision, or will it be cooperation and and benefiting from it, I would say that maybe there was a little bit of an adversarial relationship a few years back, maybe I would say 5 years, 6 years back, or maybe even a little earlier, but all that has changed. We've had, I think, very frequent interactions with the private sector. Much has changed in the defense procurement process itself. Earlier, I remember, the Indian private industry used to be looked upon as somebody not to be, welcomed or, talked to. But that is gone. It's out of the window now. And the results are there to see for us, be it the type of equipment that you're getting, be it the type of ideas. When we throw the challenges of IDEX, we had given about 75 challenges in 2022. And we got a response of more than 1,350. So there is a lot of talent, there is a lot of aspiration, a lot of energy, a lot of drive in the private sector, the startups, the SMEs, MSMEs, and so on. And we need to harness that. And so there is no doubt in my mind that that is the way ahead, and that is where we are going to succeed. And I am at least very clear in my mind that by 2047, we will become an Atmanirbhar force, if not earlier. So all that remains is for us to harness the available talent, the available energy, enthusiasm, and support them a little bit. We have to handhold the users. Primarily, have to handhold them because as Mandelbrot said, the failure to explain is caused by a failure to describe. Because many times we are not able to explain what we want, and therefore the one who's trying to make it is not able to understand as to what is it that you want. So if there is close cooperation between the user, the research agency like DRDO, then the private sector, and they work together, then there is much ability to deliver world-class products made in India, made by India, and made for us, and where applicable, made for the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I turn to Mr. Bhatia?
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. I would like to take a step back and talk about it. Let's take a look at when the clarion call came for making in India. I think it was 2014. It was in a meeting which was held by the Prime Minister, and he said we need to start making in India. This followed by Atmanirbhar Bharat, and then came the step when we said make in India for the world. Now, what are the two compulsive factors which are behind this? I am talking about defense manufacturing. First is that geostrategic scenario has clearly indicated that India, if it has to be a Viksit Bharat and it has to occupy the rightful place in the Committee of Nations, then it cannot be a net importer of security. That means we need to be self-reliant. The second is a more compulsive economic reason, and since we are talking about it, I think it's important to highlight. That's that India is a very young country. Average age is around 29, 30 years. We have 400 million people looking for effective work. And it is best that the manufacturing industry comes up, because manufacturing industry has a multiplier, and defense and aerospace has the largest multiplier in the manufacturing industry. So there were two compulsions which actually start to drive that India needs to have a vibrant military industrial complex, or what we call defense industrial base. Now coming back to the point, private sector. You can't win a match if half of your people and maybe the better half is sitting outside. So you need a whole of nation approach. And if you need whole of nation approach, there's no way that private sector can be kept out. Now, also let me give you a small figure which Dr. Kamath had quoted. Private sector only makes 22% of the total production which is done in the country. And total last year was 1,28,000 crores. But exports which were 21,000 crores, 65% came from private industry. So this tells you the importance of the private industry, and in any case, we all need to work together to actually achieve the aim of a Viksit Bharat.
Thank you. I will just sort of ask you, Mr. Bhatia, if indeed the private sector has to play a more effective and a bigger role in India's quest for Atmanirbharta in defense, what are the hurdles that you see coming in the way? In the sense that with our kind of private sector R&D investment, which is at a very low level,
Yeah.
I mean, are there any other challenges that you see private sector has to overcome to realize its potential? I mean, how do you see the hurdles?
So in the last session we heard that we don't want to talk about glass half full or full. But my point is that if we were to take a look, I think glass is more than half full. DRDO has developed most of their platforms with private industry. I've said most, and he would be right, and Dr. Kamath would probably endorse that it was the private sector which was partners to DRDO in many large programs. Most of the successful programs, we were partners in some way or the other. I'm not saying that...
Since when? Since when?
Oh, since very
Okay.
long time.
So that's
last
very
2
reassuring.
decades, maybe more than 2 decades.
Since the 1980s.
Yeah, since 1980, in fact,
DRDO has been
first was
working with
Namika,
private sector.
I was in L&T, which we did with DRDO.
So DRDO has been working with private sector since the 80s.
Since 80s.
It's only now that they have become system integrators.
That's right.
Earlier they were partners in developing subsystems, components, but now they are becoming our partners for system integration. So that has changed, and that has happened recently.
So this is exactly the point that we have been working. Although same, we never went into the system space. And I think one of the examples of that, and probably you're going to ask that a little later, so I'll leave it for that for later. But the key point here was that we have been working together. Now, what is the thing which can spur? Let me just tell you, defense procurement procedure in 2002 was a secret document. Leave alone a vendor knowing about it, loss of it would lead people to court-martial. Today, the defense acquisition policy or the procedure which is being formulated, we are the stakeholders in consultation, private sector. So there is a lot of things have changed. Well, you will say that is there no scope left? The answer to that is, yeah, they'll mange more. Of course, there is scope for improvement. We could do much more going forward. And those are the hurdles, those are the little wrinkles in the sheets which
So
you
what
need
are
to
those
build.
wrinkles?
Yeah, okay. So you are putting that. I will bell the cat. The point which we bring about every time is that if you talk about level playing field, and I'm sure if a DPSU guy was sitting here, he would say private industry gets greater preference than he does. But well, we need a little more leveling. Maybe little less of nomination, little more of open. But I would say that we are looking at this not against DPSUs. I think we are working together. This is more against the foreign payment terms. You know, a foreign vendor will get money on line of credit, I'll get it through CDA, which may take another 6 months. The biggest reform which private sector would ask for is cutting down the acquisition cycle. Now the reason is that acquisition cycle cannot be longer than the technology development cycle. Because if it is longer than that, you are picking up obsolete technology. And technology is changing so rapidly today that you need to cut that down so that you are getting state-of-the-art equipment. Second, I would say break down the silos. Lot of work has happened, but we need to work together as a team like this nation worked during COVID. So I think these were the two recommendations if you were to ask me. I would
Okay.
give.
Thank you. I know Mr. Kamath is wanted to come in, but before you come in, Mr. Kamath, I want to go to Admiral Hari Kumar and ask him this question: that is it true that the user's voice, which you are the user, I mean, whether it is the private sector or the public sector, you don't really care. You want the best stuff that is available to your forces. Now, are you getting the kind of weightage in the entire partnership, and are you happy with the way private sector is being brought in, and is there a scope for getting private sector into the system, even though it means at the cost of companies like HAL, who are in the news for wrong reasons? What is your take on it? You know, I mean, is there a problem that is brewing? Public sector defense companies are saying, "Oh God, you know what is really happening?" Private sector is coming and taking away the malai, as they say. Admiral Kumar.
See, our experience with the private sector has been good. At the same time, there have also been issues with, shipbuilding in the private sector. You're aware of the PIPA and similar shipyards. But I would give that, to initial ventures for the first time, doing shipbuilding in the private sector, etc. So as we mature and our shipbuilding industry gets, support, I'm sure the private sector will deliver what is required. So one of the issues that we find, in addition to what Mr. Bhatia was saying, is the problem of funding for the private sector. There are, when you have the IDEX challenges and people come up with ideas and they are trying to make a prototype, etc. There is a certain amount of funding from the IDEX itself, but that is probably inadequate. So a number of the SMEs had come to me to see, whether we can take up this issue of, how do we support them. So we had taken up from the Navy, we had taken up a paper on, you have banks for housing, you have banks for infrastructure. Why don't you have a bank for defense, which is a completely specialized field? Because the banker doesn't understand the nuances of the DPP, where even the procurement approval cycle is much longer than even the technology cycle. So by the time you get an approval itself, the technology is outdated. So how do you support it? So this was taken up at the highest level, And
You mean the banking issue?
pardon me,
The
funding,
banking issue, financing issue.
So the banking issue, and then the Honorable Finance Minister was kind enough in December 2023 to chair a meeting. She was not very keen on a new bank, but she tasked the SIDB to facilitate this. So I facilitate this for the SMEs. Mr. Amay Belorkar from Maharashtra was there. We gave a presentation, and the Honorable Finance Minister gave a directive to SIDB that in 100 days I want all these issues resolved and loans distributed, which did bear fruit, and I'm glad to see many reforms being introduced in the budget towards supporting defense, the private sector in defense and so on. So I have not kept track of it, but I'm sure it is worked out well, and I mean that is the way ahead. So so as the user, if you ask me, you just have to look at the quality of small arms being carried by your troops, what is being made in India, world-class quality. In fact, they are exporting. The problem lies to some extent with the silos within us, within the services, between the various organizations like services, DRDO, private sector and so on, etc. We need to overcome all those, and even within the organization, say within the services, there are various silos. So we need to transcend these.
So how do you go overcome this?
It has to be top-driven, I feel. Okay. You have to bring in change, and it can only be top-driven. It cannot be otherwise, because I have seen myself. When you have organizations working within my own servers, you will used to find that the staff requirement guy has got a axe to grind against some other directorate. So it keeps getting delayed on frivolous issues. So we need to make the defense procurement process much simpler. And when we make policy changes, we don't look at the fifth order effects, as the Honorable Prime Minister had said. So many times the policy will come back to bite you after some time. So therefore, I feel every policy should have a sunset clause. Review, change if it's not serving any purpose, and we have to be more nimble and in decision making. You can't have a very large body trying to make a decision. The Harvard studies have shown that if more than 6 people are involved in taking a decision, it just doesn't happen. Yep. So the system needs, and I'm not saying this has not been thought of. A lot of studies have been done. A lot of reports have been generated. But on ground, I think these are the pain points.
Well, I think you made many suggestions in terms of policy changes, but one clarification, Admiral Kumar, you talked about the funding issues, and I'm just trying to understand it from a financial point of view, that an order being placed on a defense project where there is assurance, there is guarantee, there is a buyer, is a kind of a monopsony. So why should the banks be a little wary of funding them?
There is no understanding of the defense system. The banker treats it as a normal, banking loan that he gives to a commercial sector. It doesn't work like that. The product lead time is different. Now he requires money to make the product, and he receives a payment after a much longer time. So this understanding is what is lacking, and hopefully SIDBI has been able to bring in some measure. They ask for collateral. So what we must realize is in a MSME or a startup that is trying to make a prototype or even give you a product, failure rates are high. World over, I think the research failure is success rate is over 9%, less than 10%. So therefore, that understanding has to be there, that there is a risk, and then support the startup or the.
I think that's a very important point that you made. Mr. Kamath has been waiting to respond. Mr. Kamath, apart from what you wanted to say to what Mr. Bhatia and Admiral Kumar said, I just would like you to respond to this question about level playing field, as well as breaking the silos and probably the funding issues. Yeah, please.
So first, let me clarify to what Mr. Bhatia said. I agree with him that our current acquisition process is too long. It takes too long to place an order. And this year, as you are aware, Honorable Raksha Mantri has declared it as a year of reforms in the Ministry of Defence. And the most important reform is to speed up the acquisition cycle. So the Defence Secretary is the one who's handling this, and I'm sure by this year end, we will have a much faster acquisition cycle. So that was the first clarification which I wanted to give. Regarding level playing field, I can say with respect to DRDO, whenever we choose our development cum production partners, we treat PSUs and private sector equally. We are partnering Bharat Forge, we are partnering Tata Advanced Systems, we are partnering with L&T, we are partnering with all large companies in India today. Of course, it's through a tendering process. If a PSU bids lower, they get the contract.
So there is no collision as yet.
It's a purely transparent process where there is a level playing field. So I don't think that this level playing field going ahead, at least from DRDO's side, I can assure you that there is a level playing field.
Yeah, sure.
With respect to silos, we need to break that. I fully agree. Each one of us looks at the overall problem as an organizational issue. I think we have to look at a whole of nation approach.
Yeah.
And we have to address the problem because it's the country's need, not the organization's need. We have to look at the bigger picture rather than just the interests of your own organization. But I am sure this is changing, and I'm hopeful that in the coming years, we will work together and achieve technology leadership in the years to come.
Okay,
With
that's very
respect to
reassuring.
funding, with respect
Mr.
to
Bhatia wanted to respond to some of the points.
Sir, when I mentioned level playing field, I never had DRDO in mind. In fact, if at all, DRDO has been more kind to private sector. We have been having almost all the development projects mostly are with private industry. So that was not the thing. I was talking about nomination of shipbuilding at the government level, which probably over a period of time when industry matures, I think it should be more competitive rather than that. For development projects, I'll fully endorse 100%. It is transparent and it is full level playing field.
Mr. Kamath, I will come back to you. And I wanted to ask you this question because globally, defense research has been at the edge of all other innovation, in a sense that defense research has given many technologies that commercially has made living easier. I'm talking about how NASA actually helped create information technology networks and everything, which Google adopted. What has been DRDO's experience in contributing to that might of technology which the private sector has been able to exploit and commercially made it? Is there any case study or is there any example of DRDO's role there? Can you please enlighten us, which is also a kind of a sign of defense and private sector collaboration and coordination?
So very good question. A lot of our technologies have dual use. So we encourage our partners, our industry partners who work with us or who take technology from us to see how they can exploit the technology that we have developed for defense purpose. How that same technology can be exploited for civilian use. So let me give an example. Since Admiral Hari Kumar is here, we developed a fire suppression system for a submarine.
Okay.
Because you can't allow a fire inside a submarine to last very long. So you need to extinguish it very quickly. So a lab of DRDO called CIFIS developed this system. And if you remember, a couple of years back, we had this problem of buses catching fire.
Yes.
So a lot of our partners who worked with us for this technology, for developing it for submarines, have translated the same technology into a product which is now mandated by the government to go into all commercial buses. And that has resulted, if you see in the last 1 year, you have not heard of buses catching fire.
That's right.
So this is one example where the technology which we developed for a defense application with the help of our partners got translated into a civilian application which is serving a very useful role today. Another example of a technology is the biodigester technology. This we had developed for our soldiers who operate at high altitudes where it is difficult for our human waste to degrade. Now the same technology is being employed with the help of our industrial partners in all railways, trains. So these are examples, a couple of examples where technology which is developed for defense application has been converted to a useful technology for civilian applications. And I'm sure the trend is going to increase because the private sector also wants to make sure that they maximize the profits of the technologies which they develop with us or they acquire from us. So it's ideal. That same motivation didn't exist with PSUs. The private sector, once they have got involved, are now much more willing and ready to convert existing technologies into civilian applications.
What is really at the heart of the problem? I mean, you are also technically a state-owned enterprise, although you're a department, and the PSU mentality, why has it not changed? From your perspective, is the only way out is to maybe privatize them? Is that the only way out?
No, I don't think that is the only solution. I'm not saying that PSUs are not capable of this. In the past, they were happy because they were getting assured orders from the government, so there was no motivation. But now with competition coming in, I'm sure the PSUs will also evolve and make sure that they maximize whatever technologies they develop or acquire. I'm sure PSUs going ahead will also be competing in the market. They had no competition in the past, they had more or less monopoly, whether it is HAL or BEL, but that is changing very quickly.
One supplementary to you, Mr. Kamath, Admiral Kumar talked about funding issues, the banks. Do you have perspective on that? Why is this financing becomes an issue?
So there are two issues about funding. First is the R&D spending, which if you see, we spend about 5% of our defense budget on defense R&D. If you look at developed countries or our competitors such as China, US, Russia, they spend close to 10 to 15% of their defense budget on R&D. The risk involved with R&D, as Admiral Hari Kumar mentioned, only if you want to do cutting edge R&D, if you want to do incremental R&D, then the risks are lower. But if you want to do cutting edge R&D and invest in new technologies, then the risk of failure is very high. In our country, that risk appetite in the private sector is lacking. So it will be the responsibility of the government to fund R&D. And if you see, the finance minister has announced that 25% of DRDO's R&D budget will be used for funding R&D in private sector as well as in academia.
Oh, that's a wonderful initiative. Yeah.
So going ahead, I'm sure the R&D spend within the industry because of the government support will also then increase, because once they see the fruits of their R&D, they will then start investing on their own. So I'm sure going ahead, the future looks bright in this. Then what Admiral Hari Kumar mentioned is the money required during production. Because the acquisition cycle is long, the testing cycle is very long, they need working capital, which is a separate problem which has to be addressed through the banking channels or through the SIDBI So that is a bigger problem which needs to be addressed, because larger companies get the banking support. The smaller players find it hard to raise capital. But now with our capital market also encouraging MSMEs to list, maybe that is another mechanism, and the venture capitalists are also now looking at investing in startups. So I am sure the problem will get reduced going ahead. But so there are two issues. One is R&D funding, one is the funding required during the production cycle.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. And before I come to Mr. Bhatia, and I will go to Admiral Kumar and ask you something else completely different. In the 1980s and the early 1990s, we grew up with this specter of agents and agencies in defense contracts, and governments also fell. Now, is it a thing of the past, or do agencies and agents still play a role in defense collaboration, and particularly now that the private sector has come in a big way, how has that thing been sorted out? Do you still have the problem of dealing with agents and agencies, agency commission, everything? So how has Navy, for that matter, has tackled this reality of dealing with companies and their agents?
To the best of my knowledge, that is behind us. We would have seen in the last at least 10 years, there has been no such scams or anything like that just come to light. Okay. The process is transparent.
Okay.
But it is painfully transparent because it takes such a long time. Yeah. And there is a fear, among the decision makers of the midnight knock happening maybe 10 years, 20 years after you retire, and some cases being opened, etc. So, people find some reason to further discuss or re-examine something rather than come to a decision and go ahead. Because, when you put up a staff requirement or the QRs, etc., there will always be some requirement to modify, improve, or change, etc., because it's not always cast in stone. Now, whenever some change is required, then it leads to prolonged discussions and debates and so on, which is avoidable. So, however, in the interest of transparency, we need to have that. So, we have to strike the right balance between this to make sure that it is a transparent, fair process, but at the same time it meets the requirements of technology, because today technology is growing exponentially. What we thought we could do with X type of system, today you can do it at, it has got probably 10 times more capability at 1/10 the cost. That is the sort of technology that is being made available. So, and at the same time it is being rendered obsolete also much faster. So, if we don't change our processes and make it work much faster and more nimble and quicker in deciding, we will get left behind in this. So, I think competition has been very good. I am particularly happy with the quality of the I just as an example, the quality of the small arms, etc., that has brought in by the private sector. And also, just to add this point, that what we need to do is, develop the commercial sector. Like when you are looking at aviation, for example, if you are only trying to build, say, warships, or if you are trying to build only fighter aircraft, then I don't think it's a very successful model. You will need to, go commercial, because there are spin-offs of the technology both ways, which can come in for military use, or from military use it can go to civil use. I mean, that's how Boeing, for example, has flourished. I was fortunate to visit the Boeing factory in 1996. Their order books were full till 2025 at that point of time, and they were turning out 1 aircraft a day, at the end of the assembly line, almost 365 aircraft in a year. So that is the type of, and those are commercial aircraft. Now, when you're building commercial aircraft, engine technology, avionics, a lot of it is fly-by-wire systems. A lot of things are already, factored in it, and you can adapt it for military use. Or from military use, you can adapt it to commercial use.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bhatia, apart from what you wanted to come in on, can you also address this question that Admiral Kumar very beautifully explained about decision-making process being so transparent that it is painfully slow, and that is affecting maybe decision-taking. So both the issues.
So first thing, let me take the acquisition process. I think we are linear in nature. We need to become parallel. Every activity happens after one activity is over, and we are linear in nature. We need to become parallel. Some extraneous activities may even be done post-acquisition, and some activities are actually not required to be done. We also need to use modern tools for simulation to be brought in. I'm sure, like this is the year of reform and Dr. Kamath mentioned, I am sure all these things are being addressed. Coming to the point which I wanted to raise was on technology and funding. See, technology is changing at a pace faster than anybody can anticipate. And what has happened is that there is also a change in this particular millennium, that previously technology used to flow from military domain to the private sector, industry. In this millennium, it's actually flowing from private industry to the military domain. Take a look at so many things which have been done up into this. Take a look up at optical, the cameras, the vision devices, the communications, and you can talk about it, they are all developed in civilian domain. So now it has become paramount that you need breakthrough technologies to come forward. And breakthrough technologies come through the startups. And that's where the funding problem really comes up. All the large companies in this country are having business other than defense, and hence can sustain even if they are delayed. But take a look at breakthrough technology people working out of garages, just getting 1.5 crore grant for developing a project. Generally, they are able to only make a small prototype which meets 80% of the requirement, and they run out of funding. Thereafter, they have no tangible assets, so how do they go and raise the funds? And even if they raise the funds, the cost of raising funds in our country is 11 to 14% for a small person. So this is where we have been talking to SIDBI, like he mentioned, that we need to start looking at grants which are running into 20 years, 30 years, with very little interest rates, maybe nominal. And the last point which they all mentioned, and Admiral Hari Kumar was also telling, how do we end up handling a failure? 80% of these people are going to fail, and they have taken government money. How are we going to account for that? So unless we are able to tackle this problem, the breakthrough technologies will still have a little setback, and we need to find a funding mechanism.
I think Mr. Kamath would like to have the last word.
Yeah, so I would just like to add that this failure and how the government can handle this failure is going to be the most important reform that we need to do. For that, we need a separate chapter in GFR which allows for failure. Current GFR treats R&D as acquisition. So you can't fail. If I have given you money, you have to deliver me something. So this, I think the government now has understood this problem, and under ANRF, they have set up a committee to look at how the GFR can be changed or a separate chapter added so that failures in R&D can be handled. So this is the point.
I think that's a wonderful point, and to end this beautiful discussion with, reform, deregulation commission is being talked about. Probably you need to change the GFR government financial rules in this area as well. And the one great takeaway from what Mr. Bhatia talked about was that technology, breakthrough technology is now moving in a reverse direction. It is coming from the private sector, going back to the defense establishments. I think that's a sign, that's a development we need to celebrate. Once again, thank you, Mr. Kamath, Admiral Kumar, Mr. Bhatia, for being part of this discussion.